I never planned to fake my own death. In fact, the idea hadn't even crossed my mind until a raccoon crawled into my car engine, chewed through half the wiring, and set the whole thing on fire. That was on a Thursday. By Saturday, I was legally dead, and by Tuesday, I was a millionaire. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the beginning, the real beginning. I was 33, broke, and living in a converted tool shed behind my cousin's house. My apartment had no insulation, a space heater that screamed like a banshee, and a window that didn't close all the way. I made $11 an hour scanning paper receipts for a medical billing company, a job so boring that I started naming the printers for entertainment. Shout out to Jamal and Paper Tina Turner, my most loyal coworkers. My life wasn't tragic exactly, just invisible. I had no debt, no criminal record, and no one really keeping track of me. I was the kind of guy that restaurants forget to bring water to. Which is why, when my car caught fire, and the fire spread to the shed, and the shed exploded thanks to a leaking propane tank, the police had very little to go on. No remains, just ashes, a melted license plate, and a box of my belongings that had survived the blast by sheer dumb luck. And that's when it happened. They assumed I had been inside. It wasn't a big media thing, just a brief mention in the local paper. Unidentified remains believed to belong to man killed in storage shed fire. No one came forward to question it. Not my cousin, he was out of town. Not my boss, I'd quit via email the day before. And not my ex, she blocked me after I returned her pet snake with the wrong heating lamp. I was a ghost. And the first thing I did as a ghost was go to IHOP. I sat in the back corner with a fake mustache and sunglasses I bought from a gas station. I ordered pancakes, bacon, and a chocolate milkshake, the "I'm probably not real anymore" combo. I kept glancing at the waitress like she might arrest me. Of course she didn't. No one did. That's when I realized I could do anything. It started small. I used a fake name, Toby Renner, and got a motel room on the edge of town. I had $423 in cash and a backpack with 3 t-shirts and a Kindle. For 2 days, I just walked around watching people live their lives, wondering what came next. On the 3rd day, I met Derek. He was sitting in the motel lobby talking loudly on the phone about crypto, drinking Red Bull at 10 a.m., and bragging to whoever was listening that he just turned $5,000 into mid-5 figures overnight. I rolled my eyes, but then I heard him mention a site I recognized, one I dabbled in years ago. I sat down next to him, cautiously. "You trade on CoinRise?" I asked casually. He looked at me. "Yeah? You?" "Used to. Lost more than I made." He laughed. "That's because you didn't use my spreadsheet." I didn't know it then, but that spreadsheet and Derek were about to change my life. Derek had one gift: blind confidence. He could sell melted ice to an Alaskan. He talked like every idea he had was already a billion-dollar company, and people believed him because he never blinked when he lied. We started hanging out, trading tips, watching charts. At first it was harmless, betting on meme coins, pooling our cash, setting stop-loss triggers. But then Derek found something strange. It was an algorithm buried deep in one of the exchange APIs. A bug, really. It miscalculated the fee structure when trades were executed within a certain millisecond window. A tiny error, not enough to raise red flags, but just enough to exploit. "You see this?" Derek whispered, showing me the numbers on his screen. "We could loop this." I was skeptical until we tried it with $100, then $500, then $2,000. Each time the profit was small, but instant. The program we built ran 24/7, skimming fractions of a cent over and over. And it worked. Within 2 weeks, we'd made over $40,000 in just 2 weeks. Derek called it the mosquito because it drained money without being noticed. I called it something else. Illegal. Derek laughed when I called it illegal. "Dude, it's not theft, it's math. If a vending machine gave you extra change every time you push the button just right, would you call the cops on yourself?" I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because we just made another $1,200 in 40 minutes. Morality has a weird way of bending when your bank account balance starts adding commas. Still, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake in the motel bed, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if the FBI even used motel Wi-Fi to track financial crimes. Every knock on the door made my chest tighten. Every time Derek said, "We need to scale this," I felt like I was standing on the edge of a rooftop in a windstorm. But I kept going. Because the thing they never tell you about being broke isn't just that it sucks, it's that it makes you feel small, disposable, replaceable. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I felt like I was winning. Within a month, we had nearly $200,000 across 4 different crypto wallets. We had code running on remote servers. We even hired a guy online, someone named PixelBlitz87, to create a fake investment dashboard we could show to potential clients. Derek wanted to bring in outside capital to multiply our gains. I wasn't so sure. I started researching international tax havens. Derek started researching yachts. "You ever been to Belize?" he asked one night, tossing me a cheap cigar. "We could open a shell company, buy a fishing charter, right off the boat. Boom! Money laundering and margaritas." "I barely have a passport," I muttered. "That's what Toby Renner would say. You need to start thinking like a ghost, my dude." And that's when I realized I didn't exist anymore. Not really. Not on paper, not in systems. To the government, I had burned to death in a propane explosion, and somehow the longer I stayed dead, the freer I felt. Then came the email. It was a Thursday morning, gray and humid. I was brushing my teeth in the motel bathroom when Derek shouted from the other room, "You need to see this!" I ran out, foam still in my mouth. On his laptop was an email from a private equity firm in Singapore. One of Derek's Reddit pitches had actually landed, and they were offering to wire us $1.5 million in seed funding to explore algorithmic efficiencies in the crypto space. All they needed was documentation. "Can we fake this?" Derek asked, eyes wide. "I mean, yeah, probably." We spent the next 48 hours creating the most ridiculous fictional fintech startup the internet had ever seen. We called it Phantom Arbitrage Inc., with complete fake employee bios, customer reviews, and even a press release claiming we'd been featured in Forbes Asia. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe for them to ghost us? Maybe for Interpol to show up. But they sent the wire. $1.5 million. Clean, fast, real. We were stunned. Derek hugged me. He said, "We made it! You realize that, right? We actually made it!" But I couldn't celebrate. Something in my gut was wrong. I started seeing shadows. Not real ones, just that creeping paranoia that comes when you realize you've pushed too far. One night, I thought I saw someone following me into a gas station. The next morning, our server was briefly unreachable. Derek brushed it all off, but I knew what was coming. We were ghosts, sure, but eventually someone always notices the lights flickering. And then, just like that, it all came crashing down. Let me know if you're ready for part 3, where the consequences begin and the twist that changed everything. It started with a knock. Not the kind that comes from an annoyed neighbor or a food delivery. This one was heavy, rhythmic, confident. Like whoever was on the other side already owned the room. Derek froze. His spoon clattered into his Cheerio bowl. We looked at each other. 2 guys in boxers, surrounded by pizza boxes, empty Red Bulls, and laptops that probably violated a dozen international laws. Another knock. Then a voice. Calm, male. "Open the door, gentlemen. We need to talk." Derek mouthed, "FBI?" My mouth went dry. I stood, unsure whether to run, hide, or throw the laptop out the window. The knocking stopped. Then came the beep, that unmistakable high-pitched tone of a keycard lock being overridden. Before I could even reach the bathroom, the door swung open and 3 men in suits stepped in. But they weren't wearing badges, no uniforms, no drawn weapons. Just suits. One of them smiled. "Mr. Renner, Mr. Banks, relax, we're not law enforcement." Derek and I stared. The man in front took a slow step forward. He looked like someone who'd never lost a negotiation. Early 50s, sharp jawline, eyes like polished obsidian. "You can call me Howard. I represent interests with a stake in your, let's call it a technical achievement." Derek blinked. "Wait, you're not the police?" Howard chuckled. "Do we look like the police? No. But believe me, you want to hear what we have to say." We ended up in a private suite 5 floors above, drinking top-shelf bourbon while Howard laid it all out. He worked for something called Arcus Ventures, a shadowy firm that specialized in strategic disruption management. Translation, they cleaned up messy geniuses who got too smart for their own good. "You two stumbled into something very interesting," he said, swirling his glass. "You figured out how to exploit latency gaps in hybrid blockchain arbitrage. Impressive. Crude, but impressive." "We didn't," I started. He held up a hand. "We're not here to scold you. In fact, we'd like to offer you a way out. A clean exit. You walk away with your money, most of it anyway, and in return you disappear." Derek narrowed his eyes. "Disappear how?" Howard smiled. "You keep the millions, we take the system, and you sign a contract promising never to touch high-frequency code again." I leaned forward. "And if we say no?" His smile didn't change, but the warmth behind it vanished. "Then you'll find that the world suddenly becomes very small. Flights get delayed. Bank accounts lock. You'll become ghosts in a much less romantic sense." We signed. They wired us $4.2 million, split between us. Clean, untouchable. Then they erased phantom arbitrage from the internet, like it had never existed. Derek moved to Thailand, started a bar, sends me photos of sunsets and Muay Thai fights, and girls half his age. Me, I went home. Back to the city, bought a decent apartment, took my mom on a cruise, started volunteering at a youth tech center. Sometimes I still wake up and wonder if it was real, if I actually stumbled into millions, or if the whole thing was just a long con with no villain. But here's the thing no one tells you about accidental fortune. It's not about the money. It's about the moment you realize the world isn't as locked in as it seems, that the cracks in the system are real, and sometimes, if you're reckless enough, you can slip through one.